Summer nights were never quiet for me. The silence itself was a sound, a heavy blanket that made every snap of a twig feel like it was right behind my ear. My cousin Noah always said I was being dramatic. He didn't understand. He didn't feel how silence gained weight in the dark. Tonight, that weight was crushing. We were standing outside the rusted gates of the old Crescent Lake amusement park, the beams from our flashlights shaking like we had a fever. The park had been a ghost since the late 90s, a tombstone marking a ride malfunction that claimed 3 lives. Now, it was a rite of passage for the reckless. Noah was reckless, and tonight he dragged me along with him. "Come on," Noah whispered, his voice a ghost in the dark. He slipped through a gap in the gate like a shadow. "We'll just snap a few pictures and get out. 10 minutes tops." I followed, the familiar weight of my camera a small comfort against my chest. The air inside was thick with the smell of rust and rot, a metallic temps mixed with damp earth. Towering rides, once vibrant with neon and laughter, were now just skeletons clawing at the night sky. The pale moonlight collected in puddles on the cracked asphalt, illuminating shards of broken bulbs like scattered diamonds. Our first stop was the carousel. The horses were nightmarish, their paint peeled away to reveal splintered wood. Their jaws cracked into permanent, silent screams. I raised my camera and took a few shots. The flash exploded, painting the decay in a harsh, momentary light. When the darkness rushed back in, it felt deeper, more absolute than before. We moved on, our footsteps echoing unnervingly through the empty space until we reached the old food court. Noah froze, his flashlight beam landing on a table. There, sitting on the grimy surface, was a half-eaten sandwich, still wrapped in a clean napkin. It was fresh. "Someone's here," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper, thin and fragile in the vast quiet. "Probably just some homeless guy," Noah dismissed, though his own voice had lost its earlier bravado. "We'll be fine. Let's keep moving." But we weren't fine. As we walked, a flicker of light caught my eye. It was coming from one of the low-slung maintenance buildings. A single candle, its flame dancing in the window, and there were shadows moving on the wall. Not the wavering, uncertain shadows of a flickering candle flame. These were solid, deliberate, walking shadows. "Noah," I hissed, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Someone's in there." Before we could even think to retreat, a door creaked open, the sound slicing through the silence. A tall, crooked figure stepped out into the moonlight. He was draped in a torn, dark coat, the hood pulled low over his face. He was dragging something behind him, something that made a low, scraping, wet sound on the concrete. The sound of soaked fabric being pulled across the ground. The man stopped, his head slowly turning as if sensing the air. We couldn't see his face, but even from a distance, I could make out dark, sprawling stains covering his sleeves. Noah's hand clamped down on my arm, his grip like iron. He yanked me towards the funhouse. Its garish, smiling entrance now, a leering maw. We scrambled inside just as the hooded figure began to turn in our direction. The funhouse was a labyrinth of shattered mirrors. 100 fractured versions of our terrified faces stared back at us. I killed my flashlight, plunging us into near-total darkness. My own heartbeat was a deafening drum in my ears. Outside, the footsteps started again, slow, measured, and that awful dragging sound followed right behind. We dove behind a splintered ticket booth, holding our breath, praying to be invisible. The dragging stopped right at the entrance. The man's shadow fell long and distorted across the floor, a dark predator sniffing the air. It lingered for what felt like an eternity, a silent, terrifying question hanging in the space between us. Then, it moved on, heading toward the back exit of the funhouse. A wave of relief so intense it almost made me sick washed over me. When we were certain he was gone, I motioned to Noah. It was time to go. Now, we slipped out a side door, our feet pounding on the asphalt as we sprinted for the fence, for the world outside this nightmare. We were almost there. I could see the rusted metal, our gateway to safety. Then I realized I was running alone. I couldn't hear Noah's frantic footsteps behind me anymore. I skidded to a stop, turning back, my breath catching in my throat. He was just gone, vanished into the oppressive darkness. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I whispered his name, but only the lonely night wind answered. Then, from somewhere deep within the park, near the lake, I heard a splash, a heavy, final sound. The sound of something large hitting the water. I didn't wait. I didn't look back. I scrambled over the fence, the sharp metal tearing at my hands, and I ran. I ran until my lungs burned and the ghostly lights of Crescent Lake were just a bad memory fading behind me. The next morning, the entrance to the park was wrapped in yellow police tape. Noah's name was on the news, on the missing persons report. They said a body had been pulled from the lake, but it hadn't been officially identified yet. I just sat in my room, silent, my camera still in its bag on the floor. Later, I don't know why, I forced myself to look at the photos. I scrolled through the images of rot and decay, my finger hovering over the last one I took. It was the shot of the carousel. The cracked, screaming horse. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw it. There, in the dark corner of the frame, just behind the horse's splintered jaw, was a face. A man's face, staring directly into my lens. And he was smiling. Thank you for watching. This story was a chilling one. A reminder that some places are best left undisturbed. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more tales that will keep you up at night. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you in the next video. Layla Torres always hated elevators, not because she was claustrophobic, but because of the silence. Those few seconds trapped between floors in a metal box always felt wrong. Like the world outside had stopped, and only she was left moving. Her apartment building in Brooklyn was old, built sometime in the 70s. The elevator walls were lined with scratched steel and mirrored panels that distorted everything slightly. When she moved in, she joked that the reflections made her look like she lived in a funhouse. It wasn't funny anymore. It began on a Tuesday night. She came home after a double shift at the diner, too tired to do anything except press the elevator button and lean against the wall while it climbed. Halfway up, the lights flickered. She sighed, muttering about how unreliable the place was. When the lights steadied, she glanced at her reflection and froze. For a brief second, she swore her reflection blinked half a beat later than she did. She laughed it off. Exhaustion, she told herself, her mind playing tricks. But over the next few nights, the unease grew. She noticed the timing more often, tiny mismatches, a slight lag. Once, she raised her right hand, and the reflection hesitated before mirroring the movement. By Friday, she started to dread going home. She'd stand in the lobby pretending to check her phone until someone else entered the elevator, just so she wouldn't be alone with the mirror. That weekend, she stayed late at work to avoid it altogether. When she finally did go home, it was past 2 in the morning. The lobby was empty, the night air sharp and cold. She told herself it was fine, pressed a button, and stepped inside. The door slid shut, trapping her reflection with her. She stared at it, determined to prove it was nothing. "You're not real," she whispered. Her reflection smiled. She didn't. Her stomach turned cold. She slammed the emergency button, but nothing happened. The smile faded from the mirrored Leela's face, replaced by an expression she couldn't name, something almost curious. Then, the elevator jolted and began to move again. When the doors opened, she ran straight to her apartment, locked the door, and sat on the couch until sunrise. By morning, she convinced herself she'd imagined everything. Lack of sleep, too much caffeine. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in her apartment. Her framed photos were slightly crooked. The curtains she'd left drawn were open. Her cat, Milo, was hiding under the bed and refused to come out. That night, she decided to set up proof. She angled her phone against the elevator wall, camera facing the mirror, and hit record before pressing her floor button. She wanted to see if there really was a delay. When she got out, she played the video immediately. For the first 20 seconds, everything looked normal. But near the end of the clip, after she exited, her reflection stayed. It stood there, still as stone, staring into the camera long after she was gone. Then, without any sound, it tilted its head to the side and smiled. The video ended abruptly. Leela deleted it and told herself it was corrupted. But the next day, she found fingerprints on a bathroom mirror. Long, smudged streaks she hadn't made. She lived alone. She told her coworker, Sam, about it over coffee. He laughed, said she needed a vacation. Maybe she did, but that night, she woke up to soft footsteps coming from the kitchen. She called out for Milo, but the sound was too heavy to be him. She got up, heart hammering, and crept to the hallway. The kitchen light was off, but she could see movement reflected in the dark window above the sink. Her own shape standing there. Only, she wasn't in the kitchen. The reflection turned its head slowly, as if it had heard her breathing. Leela backed away until she hit the wall. The reflection began to move closer to the glass, its face pressing against it from the other side. She could see every detail now. Her face, but not her eyes. They were pitch black. The sound of breaking glass split the air. Layla screamed and bolted into her bedroom, slamming the door shut. She crouched in the corner, clutching her phone, but the signal was dead. The apartment was silent, except for the sound of bare feet dragging across the hallway tiles. When morning came, the door was open. Leela's phone lay on the floor, still recording. The video showed her bedroom door slowly creaking open, a shadow crossing the floor, and a hand, pale, identical to hers, reaching toward the camera. The police came later that day, after Sam reported her missing. They found no signs of forced entry. Her cat was gone. The building manager told them something strange. The tenant before Layla had vanished, too. She'd left behind one note, scrawled across the elevator mirror in lipstick. It read, "Don't look when it smiles." Tomas Darren had always believed that silence was the safest sound in the woods. In his 10 years as a forest ranger, he'd learned that when the forest goes quiet, it's watching. It listens in ways people never understand. That autumn, the storms in Montana were relentless. Lightning cracked over the tree line every night, and heavy rain made the roads impassable. Tomas volunteered to stay behind in the North Lookout Tower, while the others went down to base camp before the weather worsened. He said he preferred the solitude. Truth was, he couldn't sleep anywhere else anymore. Not since last year, when his father, also a ranger, vanished during patrol. The first 2 days passed in near total isolation. Wind howled through the tower gaps, and rain hammered the metal roof. He kept his radio on in case of emergencies, though he hadn't heard another human voice since the storm began. On the third night, as thunder rolled far away, the radio crackled softly. "Station 1, do you copy?" A man's voice said. Tomas froze. There was no scheduled transmission. He lifted the receiver, but before he could respond, the voice spoke again, quieter this time. "Tomas, can you hear me?" His chest tightened. Only one person ever called him by name over the radio like that. "Dad," he whispered, half laughing from disbelief. That static answered. Then the same voice, calm and familiar. "You need to come down from the tower. There's something you have to see." The rational part of him screamed that it wasn't possible. His father's body had never been found, but it had been nearly a year. Still, the tone, the rhythm, it sounded exactly like him. Tomas grabbed his flashlight, checked his map, and stepped out into the rain. The forest swallowed him instantly. The storm had weakened to a steady drizzle, and fog pooled thick between the trees. His boots squelched in the mud. The beam of his flashlight flickered as the radio hissed again. "You're close," the voice said, "just past the old ranger's cabin." Tomas hesitated. That cabin had been condemned years ago. He hadn't been there since he was a kid, tagging along behind his father's boots. He turned the volume down, but the voice grew louder, as if it was inside his head now. When he reached the clearing, the old cabin stood like a dark wound in the mist. One side had collapsed, and the roof was caved in. The door hung off its hinges. The smell hit him first, something metallic and foul, like wet copper. He covered his mouth and stepped inside. The floor creaked under his weight. A lantern sat on a table, flickering dimly, though he hadn't lit it. Beside it lay a soaked ranger's jacket. His breath caught when he saw the stitched Namatag T. Darren. He backed away slowly, his pulse hammering in his throat. "You found me," the voice whispered. Not from the radio this time. From behind him, Tomas spun around. At first, there was only darkness. Then something moved in the corner, a figure standing perfectly still, its features lost in the shadows. The lantern sputtered, and for a second, he saw its face. It was him. Same uniform, same scar on the chin, same eyes, except darker, hollow. Like they'd seen something the real Tomas hadn't. He stumbled out of the cabin, dropping his flashlight. Branches slapped his face as he ran through the forest, heart clawing against his ribs. He didn't stop until he saw the tower through the trees. He climbed fast, 2 steps at a time, lungs burning. Once inside, he slammed the door shut and locked it. The radio was silent now. The rain had stopped. He tried to steady his breathing, but then he saw something at the edge of the tree line. A small orange glow, like a lantern being carried. The light bobbed closer, weaving between the trees, steady and deliberate. Tomas reached for the binoculars and froze. The man holding the lantern was him again, smiling this time. Face wet with rain or something else. The copy looked straight up at the tower and raised its free hand in greeting. The radio crackled once more. "You left me there," it said softly. The light below vanished. The next morning, the rescue team finally reached the tower. They found Tomas's logbook still open, pinned mid-sentence. His chair was empty, but his boots sat neatly beside the desk, soaked through with mud. Dot on the final page of his log, written in shaky letters, were 3 words. "He's still calling."